I addressed my statement to everyone in the room. I looked at all of them, and I just said, "How dare you?"
Now back to the show.
Hi, SpongeBob.
And now, the commercial break on Nickelodeon.
You will forever have the memory of sitting in this courtroom and defending this person.
Now back to the show.
I will forever have the memory of the person you're defending violating me.
For decades, kids of all ages have grown up on iconic Nickelodeon shows. Whether that be Drake and Josh, iCarly, SpongeBob, Avatar: The Last Airbender, or whatever the hell else Nick is producing these days, there's no escaping the fact that this company has a special place in many of our hearts. However, recent years have exposed a much darker and disturbing side of Nickelodeon, one filled with troubling crimes, creepy unaired shows and theories, disturbing urban legends, and major inappropriate behavior by some of the formerly beloved cast members. Ladies and gentlemen, today we'll be going over the Disturbing Nickelodeon Iceberg. I've seen similar icebergs on Nickelodeon, but they're all pretty outdated, as they all came out before major allegations that brought more disturbing info on Nickelodeon to light. Now enough yapping, let's get straight into Tier 1. Dan Schneider controversies. If you were a Nickelodeon kid, you grew up watching Dan Schneider shows. Drake and Josh, iCarly, Zoey 101, yeah, all those classics. But in recent years, his name has become synonymous with some of the most disturbing allegations in kids' TV history. From mistreating young actors on set to including bizarrely inappropriate jokes and scenes, Schneider's legacy is now more about controversy than nostalgia. Reports from former actors and crew members detail a toxic work environment, where young actors were allegedly subjected to verbal abuse, uncomfortable situations, and questionable directorial choices. Several disturbing clips from his shows have since resurfaced, featuring inappropriate jokes and oddly specific gags, particularly revolving around Schneider's infamous obsession with feet, which we'll touch on more in a later entry. But it goes beyond just uncomfortable jokes. Former child stars like Jeanette McCurdy and Alexa Nicholas have spoken out about their negative experiences working on Schneider-led productions, detailing incidents of intense pressure, humiliating tasks, and an environment where young actors felt powerless. Even more troubling are the numerous behind-the-scenes stories of Schneider allegedly requesting uncomfortable scenes involving young actresses, particularly involving bare feet, weird physical humor, and overly suggestive gags that had no business being in a kid show. Nickelodeon finally parted ways with him in 2018, but the full truth of what went on behind the scenes remains shrouded in secrecy, with more actors speaking out about their negative experiences years later. The fact that Nickelodeon allowed this culture to persist for so long only raises bigger questions about the network's priorities and accountability. Disturbing SpongeBob episodes and jokes. SpongeBob SquarePants is a beloved cartoon, but let's be real, some episodes were straight up nightmare fuel. Graveyard Shift gave us a hash-slinging slasher, a ghostly fry cook with no eyes, and a deeply unsettling presence that haunted the Krusty Krab. Then there's Rock Bottom, where SpongeBob gets stranded in a bizarre, dark alternate dimension with nightmarish fish creatures that communicate in eerie rasping sounds. Other episodes feature disturbingly dark humor, like in Dying for Pie, where SpongeBob unknowingly eats an explosive pie, leading to Squidward spending an entire day with him, assuming he's about to watch his coworker die. Then there's Are You Happy Now?, an episode that revolves entirely around Squidward's crippling depression and features an eerily implied suicide attempt, one where he stares at a noose and falls into a depressive spiral. Another episode, One Course Meal, takes things even further. Plankton is relentlessly tormented by Mr. Krabs to the point where he contemplates ending his own life. This isn't just dark humor. It's full-blown psychological horror disguised as kids' TV. Then there's also that iconic Squidward suicide creepypasta. While it's widely considered a hoax, the fact that SpongeBob has so many real-life disturbing moments makes it oddly believable. When you realize just how much existential horror and morbid jokes are tucked into Bikini Bottom, the show starts feeling less like a lighthearted kids' comedy and more like an absurdist existential crisis. The Quiet on Set docuseries. If you thought the rumors about Nickelodeon's dark side was exaggerated, Quiet on Set will blow that whole illusion out the bag completely. This docuseries exposes the abuse, harassment, and predatory behavior that allegedly took place behind the scenes at Nickelodeon, particularly in the 90s and early 2000s. Several former child stars have come forward with shocking claims about the toxic culture they endured, including inappropriate behavior from powerful executives and directors. The most haunting revelations involve the lack of protection for child actors and the unsettling normalization of inappropriate jokes, uncomfortable interactions, and exploitative treatment. Again, just like the Dan Schneider stuff, stories of hidden abuse, coercion, and an industry that protected powerful figures at the expense of young talent are finally being brought to the public eye. One of the biggest focuses of the series is Dan Schneider's, of course, alleged conduct, as well as the broader culture of neglect and exploitation that allowed such behavior to continue unchecked. I'll be covering some of the more disturbing cases discussed in the docuseries later in the Iceberg, so be sure to stay tuned for those. The Ren and Stimpy scandal. If you ever watched Ren and Stimpy as a kid and felt like something about it was off, congrats, you were absolutely right. The show is infamous for its grotesque humor, unsettling animation, and borderline inappropriate content, but the real horror was happening right behind the scenes. The show's creator, John Kricfalusi, was later exposed for grooming and engaging in predatory behavior towards underage girls. Reports surfaced that he had inappropriate relationships with teenage fans, even allegedly bringing a 16-year-old girl to live with him while she worked at his animation studio. Kricfalusi's actions were an open secret within the animation industry, but he continued working for years with little consequence. His influence on Ren and Stimpy explains why so many episodes contain extremely suggestive, uncomfortable content, including Ren's frequent violent outbursts, scenes filled with bizarre sexual innuendos, and deeply unsettling close-up shots that seem more at home in a horror movie than a kid's show. Kricfalusi was eventually ousted from the animation industry, but the reoccurring theme here, again, is the fact that he was allowed to continue working with young artists and animators for years before Hollywood eventually ousted him. It's a chilling reminder of how Hollywood protects its most disturbing figures until it's too late. iCarly toe fetish controversy. Nickelodeon has always had an unnatural obsession with feet, and nowhere is this more obvious than in iCarly. The show features an absurd number of scenes involving feet, from characters drawing faces on their toes to making feet-based content for their web show. Fans have compiled montages of scenes across multiple shows that showcase just how extensive and bizarre the focus on feet truly was. And given what's come out about Dan Schneider's alleged behavior, these clips take on an even more disturbing context. Clips of actors being put in suggestive and humiliating situations involving their feet have led to speculation that Schneider was using Nickelodeon to fulfill his personal interests at the expense of young actors. But that's all alleged, of course. Amanda Show's disturbing skits. Back in the early 2000s, The Amanda Show was peak Nickelodeon comedy. Wacky sketches, ridiculous characters, and Amanda Bynes at her comedic best. But looking back, some of the skits hit way differently now, especially considering what we now know about the show's production thanks to docuseries like Quiet on Set. Amanda Bynes herself has since spoken out about the immense pressure, mistreatment, and exploitation she faced as a child star, particularly in Nickelodeon's chaotic, highly demanding environment. The disturbing pattern of exploiting young actresses, over-sexualizing jokes, and inappropriate humor wasn't just a coincidence. It was a symptom of a much bigger problem within Nickelodeon's culture, and it infected The Amanda Show as well. Knowing what we know now, it's hard to see The Amanda Show as just another kid's comedy. It's more like a troubling time capsule of Nickelodeon's worst era of exploitation. Moving on to Tier 2. Drake Bell's DUI arrests. Drake Bell, once Nickelodeon's golden boy, managed to pull a complete 180 from beloved sitcom star to walking PR disaster. His DUI arrests in 2010 and 2015 were just the beginning of his downhill spiral. In 2010, he got busted in San Diego for reckless driving while under the influence, which landed him with a fine and a mandatory alcohol education program. The program must have not been that effective because just 5 years later, in 2015, he decided to relive the experience, getting pulled over for speeding and swerving dangerously, which this time led to 4 days in jail and 4 years of probation. But let's not stop there. Drake Bell's legal and personal struggles have become a never-ending saga. From public financial issues to filing for bankruptcy in 2014, to later attempting to reinvent himself as a Spanish language singer, Bell has continued to make headlines for all the wrong reasons. And honestly, at this point, it's safe to say that Nickelodeon stars have either thrived post-fame or spiraled into absolute chaos. Nickelodeon's 9/11 incident. This entry refers to a creepy episode from Invader Zim. Invader Zim was already unhinged, but one moment in particular sent it into full-blown creepy conspiracy theory territory. In one episode, Dimp throws a muffin at two eerily identical skyscrapers, and yep, you guessed it, they collapse. And here's the kicker. This aired right before 9/11 happened. After the tragedy of September 11, 2001, Nickelodeon scrubbed the scene from existence, acting like it never happened. But because the internet never forgets, some people have been combing through Nickelodeon's archives for other eerie coincidences. Some Fairly Odd Parents fans claim an episode featured a burning skyscraper with falling debris, and then there's that theory that SpongeBob originally had a skyline that looks suspiciously like the Twin Towers. While this is most likely all horribly timed coincidence and speculation, it's still unsettling that a kids' network had so many visuals that ended up mirroring a national tragedy. The Rugrats theory. Congrats, you made it to the single most depressing fan theory of all time. According to this wildly disturbing interpretation of Rugrats, all the babies are actually dead. And Angelica, our favorite pint-sized dictator, is just imagining them all to cope with her loneliness. This theory gets uncomfortably specific. Tommy was stillborn, which is why his dad is constantly making toys, because he never got to raise a child. Chucky died in the same plane crash as his mom, which is why his dad is permanently an anxious wreck. And the twins? Yeah, they were never born. Angelica made them up because she didn't know if the baby her mom lost was going to be a boy or a girl. And if that's not bleak enough for you, some versions of the theory even claim that Angelica herself is dead, making the whole show some next-level ghost story nightmare fuel. While this story is purely fan fiction, you can't deny it's definitely disturbing, and it somehow makes way too much sense. And now, watching Rugrats just feels like a horror movie in disguise. Jimmy Neutron's original pilot was too creepy. Before Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius became a beloved Nickelodeon staple, its original pilot was something straight out of Uncanny Valley Nightmare. Titled Johnny Quasar, the early animation test featured a more realistic yet unsettlingly stiff version of Jimmy, with choppy movements and an eerie, hollow-eyed stare. Unlike the polished cartoony version of the characters we got later, the prototype felt lifeless, robotic, and just off. The animation produced in the late 90s was meant to showcase the CGI's potential, but instead it accidentally veered into horror territory. The facial expressions were limited, the lighting was harsh, and the lack of fluid movement made Johnny Quasar seem less like a genius and more like a haunted animatronic from a failed Chuck E. Cheese knockoff. While the test ultimately led to the successful Jimmy Neutron franchise, it remains a bizarre relic of early CGI experiments that probably would have given kids nightmares if it had aired as is. Moving on to Tier 3. Disturbing Invader Zim episodes. Yup, Invader Zim is back on the list. Nickelodeon must have had no idea what they were signing up for when they greenlit this show, because let's be honest, this show was way too disturbing for kids. And we loved it for that. The best or worst example is clearly Dark Harvest, an episode where Zim literally harvests organs from other kids and stuffs them inside himself to appear more human. Yeah, you heard that correctly. The show aired on a children's network. By the end of the episode, Zim is grotesquely bloated with stolen organs, while his victims shuffle around as hollowed out husks. fun. Then there's Bestest Friend, which introduces us to Keith, a kid so desperate for friendship that he becomes an obsessive stalker, following Zim everywhere and refusing to leave him alone. Things take a turn for the horrific when Zim has his robotic minions pluck out Keith's eyes and replace them with cameras so that he can monitor his every move. And then there's Top Secret, a mysterious, unaired episode rumored to have been too graphic even for Nickelodeon to air. Details on it are scarce, but the early descriptions suggest that it may have included even more grotesque body horror and extreme violence than usual. If Invader Zim was Nickelodeon's attempt at an edgy cartoon, they might have gone just a little too hard. Hey Arnold's parents are dead theory. Hey Arnold tried to convince us that Arnold's parents were just missing, but according to this disturbing theory, they were absolutely dead. The show tells us that his explorer parents, Miles and Stella, disappeared on a humanitarian mission in the jungle, leaving Arnold to be raised by his quirky grandparents. But how do we explain the clearly weird vibes from Grandpa Phil and Grandma Gertie? Fans have long theorized that Arnold's parents actually died on their final trip, but the truth was hidden to protect them. The evidence? The way his grandparents never seemed to give straight answers, the strangely melancholy tone of any episode discussing them, and the fact that Arnold himself seems oddly well adjusted for his kids whose parents just disappeared. The theory suggests that the grandparents created the missing person story so that Arnold would grow up with hope rather than grief. Adding to the eerie factor, there's a lost episode theory floating around that suggests that Hey Arnold originally had a much darker ending, where Arnold finds proof that his parents are truly dead, forcing him to accept reality. While no concrete evidence exists of the script, the idea that the show was originally intended to be even sadder is almost too much to handle. The Fairly Odd Parents abuse theory. On the surface, The Fairly Odd Parents is a fun, chaotic cartoon about a miserable kid getting a wish granting fairies. But if you dig deeper, it is actually kind of disturbing. A long-standing theory suggests that Cosmo and Wanda aren't magical beings at all, but Timmy's way of coping with an abusive, neglectful home life. The evidence? Timmy's parents are shockingly incompetent, rarely paying attention to him, often outright forgetting he exists, and leaving him in the hands of a sadistic babysitter, Vicky. His teacher, Mr. Crocker, is obsessively paranoid about fairies, which could symbolize a traumatized adult who also had imaginary companions as a coping mechanism but lost them. Then there's the whole rule that Timmy can't tell anyone about his fairies, and they disappear when he grows up, which eerily mirrors how children repress trauma and outgrow dissociative coping strategies. While this is just a fan theory, it casts the Fairly Odd Parents in a much darker light, turning a wacky kids show into a story about a neglected child escaping into a fantasy to survive his miserable reality. Nick Jr.'s face allegedly gave kids nightmares. If you were a Nick Jr. kid, you probably remember Face, the cheerful, bouncing host who introduced preschool programming with a giant, disembodied, talking face. Supposedly fun and friendly, Face was meant to keep little kids entertained and engaged. However, not all kids found Face so lovable. For years, there have been unsettling rumors about Face allegedly containing subliminal messages that disturbed children. Some claim that hidden messages flashed too quickly for the conscious mind to register, while others insist that certain episodes featured audio distortions or eerie background sounds. Adding to the mystery, some now adult viewers swear that certain Face segments had a strange, hypnotic quality to them. There are even unverified claims that early test footage of Face allegedly disturbed child audiences so badly that Nickelodeon had to modify the character's voice and mannerisms. While many of these stories remain an urban legend, there's no denying that for some kids, Face was less of a fun mascot and more of an unsettling fever dream. Moving on to Tier 4. Drake Bell's child endangerment conviction. Yup, Drake Bell has officially made it twice on this list. Drake Bell further saw his career crash and burn in 2021 when he was charged with attempted child endangerment and disseminating harmful material to a minor. The case involved allegations that Bell had been engaging in inappropriate conversations with an underage fan, with evidence showing that their interactions had been going on for years before authorities stepped in. Bell pleaded guilty and was ultimately sentenced to probation and community service, avoiding jail time, though the damage to his reputation was irreversible. This case was yet another dark and disturbing stain on Nickelodeon's legacy, reinforcing the disturbing pattern of former child stars getting caught up in scandals. In the aftermath, Bell largely disappeared from mainstream entertainment, resurfacing occasionally on social media and attempting to restart his music career. However, for many fans who grew up watching Drake and Josh, the revelation of his crimes made it nearly impossible to separate the actor from his on-screen persona. Michael Savino. Nickelodeon has had its fair share of behind-the-scenes scandals, but the case of Michael Savino might be one of the most haunting. Savino, who worked as an animator on The Loud House, was fired from Nickelodeon in 2017 after multiple women came forward with accusations of sexual misconduct. But it wasn't just inappropriate workplace behavior. His alleged actions included sending disturbing messages, making unwanted advances, and engaging in predatory behavior toward women in the animation industry. After being ousted from Nickelodeon, further disturbing details surfaced. Reports indicated that Savino had a pattern of manipulating and coercing younger female colleagues, using his industry position to pressure them into uncomfortable interactions. Several women described him as aggressive, persistent, and exploitative, with some saying that he continued to harass them even after they rejected his advances. Some of these allegations reportedly dated back years, suggesting a long history of predatory behavior that had been ignored or downplayed by Nickelodeon. Though Savino was never formally charged with a crime, the accusations against him were severe enough that he was blacklisted from the animation industry. In the wake of the scandal, numerous animation professionals called out Nickelodeon's failure to protect employees from workplace harassment, leading to broader discussions about the toxic work environment within the industry. Savino's case felt like yet another example of how Hollywood often protects the wrong people for far too long. Even more disturbingly, whispers within the animation industry suggest that Savino wasn't the only one engaging in inappropriate conduct. Stories of toxic environments, unchecked power dynamics, and mistreated employees paint a very dark picture of what was happening behind the scenes at our favorite kids' TV network. The real origin of Mr. Meaty's creepy puppets. Mr. Meaty was already a fever dream of horror, but rumors about its puppets made it feel even worse. The show, which followed two teens working at a fast food restaurant, was infamous for its unsettling animation style, grotesque characters, and straight-up terrifying close-ups. But some fans believe that the creepy, dead-eyed puppets weren't just weird artistic choices. They were modeled after real people, and not in a fun, Pixar character based on an animator kind of way. According to internet speculation, Mr. Meaty's character designs were inspired by real-life figures associated with some very disturbing crimes. Some claim that the exaggerated, grotesque puppet designs were eerily similar to photos of convicted criminals, while others theorize that the show's bizarre aesthetic was deliberately meant to make viewers uncomfortable. Even without the conspiracy theories, the puppets were nightmare-inducing on their own, with bulging eyes, unsettling smiles, and an overall vibe of pure discomfort. Are you afraid of the dark, real-life curses? Horror anthology shows have always had urban legends surrounding them, and Are You Afraid of the Dark is no exception. The show, which terrified an entire generation of kids with its campfire ghost stories and nightmare-inducing episodes, had an even creepier off-screen reputation, a curse that supposedly affected its cast and crew. According to conspiracy theories, an alarming number of people involved in the show have since passed away, with some estimating the number to be around 30 people. But the weirdest part? Many of these deaths were unusually mysterious or tragic, leading some to believe that Are You Afraid of the Dark was plagued by something far darker than simple bad luck. Adding fuel to the fire, some fans believe that certain Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes contain strangely prophetic elements, predicting tragedies that later befell cast members. Others have speculated that locations used for filming may have been haunted, with some crew members allegedly experiencing unexplained disturbances on set. Whether or not the curse is real, you can't deny the sheer number of eerie coincidences linked to the show, and it makes for one of the most unsettling mysteries in Nickelodeon history. Moving on to Tier 5. Jason Michael Handy. Nickelodeon has unfortunately had several controversies involving industry professionals, many of which we've already talked about, but the case of Jason Michael Handy is one of the most disturbing. Handy, who worked as a production assistant at Nickelodeon, was arrested in 2004 after authorities found illegal, child-explicit content on his hard drive. Yeah, what makes this case particularly unsettling is how he used industry connections to gain access into children's entertainment events. Court documents revealed that Handy had misrepresented himself to minors and engaged in deeply inappropriate behavior online. Authorities discovered that he had accumulated disturbing amounts of illicit child material, like I'm talking about in the thousands, which led to a 6-year prison sentence. Jason even referred to himself as a full-blown you-know-what file, and had allegedly stalked young girls near Nickelodeon's headquarters. This is easily one of the most disturbing events ever related to Nickelodeon. However, what disturbs people the most is how easily he was able to operate within the industry, again, raising the same questions about how background checks and workplace oversight failed to detect such a glaring issue. The lost Nickelodeon short that used real bones. Imagine stumbling across an old and forgotten Nickelodeon short only to realize that its puppets were made from real human bones. That's exactly the story behind Butcher's Hook, a lost stop-motion short allegedly produced in 1996 and aired only once late at night. The short supposedly featured a grotesque, skeletal puppet animated in a jittery, unnatural way, telling a vague story about a butcher who crafted marionettes out of human remains. According to those who have claimed to see it, the animation was deeply unsettling with haunting music and an eerie, dreamlike quality. The unsettling factor was so intense that Nickelodeon allegedly pulled it down from rotation immediately. What really fuels the legend is the claim that one of the animators admitted to using real bones in the puppets. Some say they were animal bones, while others insist they were some human skeletal fragments were used. No official evidence supports either claim, but Butcher's Hook remains one of the most bizarre and terrifying pieces of alleged lost media tied to Nickelodeon. Whether or not it truly existed, the mystery surrounding it continues to haunt lost media enthusiasts and Nickelodeon fans alike. Brian Peck. Probably one of Nickelodeon's biggest scandals and bombshell reveals from Quiet on Set isn't just a rumor. It's a documented legal case. In 2004, actor and dialogue coach Brian Peck was convicted for sexually inappropriate conduct and assault involving a 15-year-old actor. Peck worked on multiple Nickelodeon projects, including All That and The Amanda Show, making him a well-known figure from behind the scenes. The details of the case revealed that Peck had used his industry influence to target young actors, an unsettling reality that sent shockwaves through Hollywood. And his main victim that he assaulted and abused was none other than Drake Bell, which was revealed in the docuseries Quiet on Set. Despite the seriousness of his crime, he only served 16 months in prison. And what's even more disturbing is that after his release, Peck was still able to find work in the entertainment industry, including positions in voice acting and production. The fact that someone with a criminal record of this nature could continue working in Hollywood is frankly disgusting, and raises, again, those same questions about how much the industry actually prioritizes safety. Even though we talked about some creepy theories and some urban legends and lost media, this is by far one of the most disturbing Nickelodeon crimes and chilling reminders of the hidden dangers of children's TV. Even more unsettling is that reports suggest that many industry professionals knew about Peck's behavior long before his arrest. Yet he continued working before legal action was taken, and of course continues to work to today. This only adds to the growing list of disturbing cases where offenders operated in plain sight. It's a harsh reality that makes Nickelodeon's behind-the-scenes history far darker than most people realize, and makes you rethink all those happy times you thought you were living when you were watching Nickelodeon TV. And that, my friends, is the Disturbing Nickelodeon Iceberg. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed. Thank you all for watching. Peace.